your aloneness is the time that you set aside for you to really understand and know who you really are, what you possess, what you've allowed in, what you need to let go of, your full potential, your aspirations, your dreams, your thoughts, your emotions. And it's an opportunity for you to really reflect deeply on not just who you are and where you're going, but what you contain, what's deeply rooted underneath all of the makeup, the masks, the experiences, your thoughts, beneath all of those. And it's a place where few people really dare to go for several reasons. Mainly because nowadays people always say they have no time, or they say, what's the real purpose of sitting still and being with oneself? What am I going to discover there? Isn't that just wasting time? And those are all valid points, but the reality is if you never really spend time alone being with yourself, you're never really going to discover who you are. And if you don't discover who you are, you'll never really know what you're capable of doing, of accomplishing as a human being. And this is not something that is encouraged at school. This is not something that is encouraged at college. You know, nowadays people are starting to say it's important that you spend you time, or they've introduced mindfulness meditation. But this is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is setting aside some time for you and you alone, for the purpose of truly comprehending and understanding who you are. Because, you know, most of us are so wrapped up in our timetables that we don't even have time to think in this manner. And that's a fact. You know, most people nowadays are rushing to work, to and fro, trying to get back so that they can have some form of evening dinner or social time. And by the time that they've wrapped that up and watched a bit of TV, it's time to hit the sack and get ready for the slug. So they know they don't really have time for themselves. And you know, if you don't put that side, if you don't really put that time for yourself, you're never ever really going to discover who you are and what you're capable of doing or achieving or accomplishing, etc. So the importance of spending time with yourself is, you can see it's fundamental, and yet it's not part of our daily, weekly culture in Europe. But it's something that is practiced far more in Asia. So what are you likely to discover when you're spending time with yourself? Well, have you ever wondered about some of the agreements that you've made with yourself? For example, you might have entered into a bad relationship 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you might have said to yourself, I never ever want to enter into a relationship with someone like that ever again. And you tie yourself to that, and that someone might have been she might have been of a particular race, of a particular age, of a particular background, and you've said no, never again. However, 3 or 4 months go down the line and the exact situation arises again, with a potential of a very loving relationship, but because you've made an agreement not to go out with that particular type of person, you've completely not given yourself an opportunity to. And this happens often. So for example, you might have said to yourself, look, I don't ever want to drive. I'll just let other people drive. I don't want to drive, because you might have been in a car accident and you might have made that agreement. Could be anything. You might have had a bad experience with a plane once, and you've said to yourself, I never ever want to get on a plane again. So these are agreements that we make that year by year, without us knowing, that we're surrendering to. And if you're not in a place of awareness to understand that, you'll never be able to untie those agreements. Now, that's just a small part of what you can do and achieve, untying an agreement by sitting still, putting yourself in a position where you can fully be aware of something that you've agreed to maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago, but by sitting still, suddenly it comes forward and you see it clearly. I never knew that. I made an agreement with myself. It could be something that you agreed not to do or to do when you were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, 20 years ago. And and that agreement is still there. But because you haven't really spent time with yourself, this has never come up to the surface. Now, have you ever wondered how you speak about yourself or to yourself? See, a lot of people don't even realize that they do have a relationship with themselves, but they're not aware of it. But and I'm not talking about you speaking to yourself in an audio voice. I'm talking about an internal voice. Think about how we drive ourselves. Think about how we discourage ourselves. Think about sometimes when you're feeling low. Why? Have you ever wondered how you speak to yourself and even about yourself? If you think about the effects this has on a child growing up, if you talk to a child in a very discouraging way, in a very derogative way, in a very aggressive way, what that creates in a child. Well, have you ever wondered how you yourself speak to yourself about yourself? So this is another area you see that you need to inquire, look at. Have you ever wondered how you feel about yourself? Like truly feel about who you are, your life. And have you ever questioned, are those feelings, those emotions that I have about myself healthy? Are they proactive? Are they just? You think about it, how sometimes you may feel about a friend that's let you down. Now turn that around and ask yourself, how do you feel about yourself? Have you made mistakes that you've never forgiven yourself? You've corrected but never forgiven yourself about. And those emotions and those feelings have now turned into guilt or shame. And unless you visit them and realize what they are and how damaging they are to you, you'll never be able to let them go. So you can see these are some of the skills that you will receive just by sitting with yourself. Have you ever asked yourself what you are carrying mentally? How you think, not feel, but how you think about yourself on a daily basis? How you think about your past? How you think about your future? Have you ever really truly questioned the way that you think about yourself? Because modern science today has proven that our thoughts carry weight. They literally carry weight. So if we're thinking heavy thoughts, this will influence the way our emotions are. So have you ever questioned, these thoughts that I'm thinking about myself, about my life, about my past, about the things that I've done, about the things that I haven't done, are they really healthy? Are they benefiting me or are they damaging me? So maybe you've never even gone there. Another one, have you ever wondered what your intention to yourself is? That's a question that very few people would ask these days. What do you mean, my intention? Well, think about it. Your intention is different than your thoughts and your feelings. When you put intention into something, you put a force, you put an energy, you put a level of concentration. What's your intent to yourself, to your life, to your work, to your friends? Where are you? Do you deeply care about who you are and who you're becoming? Or has that intention weakened as you've gone older? Because you see, our experiences, year by year, they either strengthen our intention or they weaken. Have you ever asked yourself, how do you treat yourself? Do you treat yourself in a way that is fitting, or do you treat yourself that could be degrading? See, only by sitting, only by abiding in stillness will such thoughts arise. And nowadays people feel extremely heavy, and what they're allowing in is coming from 1,000 different venues and avenues from all over because of what we have access to. And so all of these things that are being filtered in and allowed in are moving around us, but do we have a way of offloading them? See, by sitting still and abiding in stillness, things come forward. They're realized through awareness, and then once they are realized through awareness, they can be dropped off, or they could be redirected, or they can be used as tools of encouragement. So you see, you're sitting in your sacred aloneness now has a new meaning. It's not just about you sitting still and abiding alone, watching the time go by. It's not. It's about sitting in stillness with yourself so that you can get to know who you really are. I don't believe as an individual you will never fulfill your potential. People are always talking about filling your potential, as a human being, as a father, fulfilling your potential, your full potential as in your relationships, as a husband or wife, as a partner. You'll never be able to fulfill your potential in anything unless you get to know yourself. You cannot. You have to know who you are. You have to know what you possess. You have to know the experience that you own in order to fulfill that. It's like me saying, hey, listen, here's a car, and this car's got enormous potential. This is what the engine is capable of. But you sit in it and you don't know. And so you're driving the car without any real knowledge of what the car can do or what it possesses. It's exactly the same thing. Human beings, they go through life, and once they finish uni or get the qualifications that they need, and they start work, normally they're on a timetable, and they just don't get time, because by the time they're on that timetable, they're purchasing things, they're gathering things, and the things that they're gathering are costing them more of their time. So this sacredness, this aloneness, week by week, month by month, and year by year goes out the window. And slowly they're just becoming a habitual response to their timetable. They're just living a life based on a timetable. And slowly you'll lose yourself this way. So what I'm saying is, this sacred aloneness, if you don't put it into your 24-hour cycle, slowly but surely you'll lose yourself, and you will never know who you fully are, what you possess, and what you're capable of. So it's hugely important. I want to tell you a story which I think is very relevant. A lot of people talk, everyone knows about this David and Goliath story. They know that this, they always use it as the underdog story. And I want to use it because I think it's relevant, because it has many key factors in bringing what I'm teaching out. So we see here a very young man, and if we look at the way that historically King David started his life, was that he was kind of slightly rejected by his father Jesse. Jesse had 6 sons, he was the 7th. And when Samuel the prophet came to inquire about a particular soul in the house of Jesse so that he could be king, David wasn't even in the equation. His father had just said, after the prophet Samuel came and looked at the first and the second and the third and the fourth and the sixth, etc., he looked at all of them and he said, "Do you not have one more? Is there not one more?" David's father's response, Jesse's response, was this: "Oh, yeah, I do. He's out with the sheep." He didn't even come into the equation or the possibility. And that shows you that sometimes, first lesson is, your own parents don't know what you possess. Your teachers won't know what you possess. Your mentors might not know what you possess. Now, what I'm saying is that they're not meant to. They can have a rough idea, but only you will know what you possess. Only you will know what you have inside, if condition you spend time with yourself. And in order for you to kind of really take what I'm saying as really important and make it into a binding principle, is that you have to know that unless you do that work, you will never discover who you are. And no one outside will ever discover who you are. They will have ideas. They will see you through their own mistakes, through their own experiences, through their own fears, through their own pollutions, through their own toxicity, through their own hopes, through their own selfish ambitions, but they will never ever know who you are. And that is your job. It's your sacred responsibility to get to know who you are. That's the beauty of life. So I'm saying, you can see here in the first point, the first key factor is Jesse, David's father, didn't know who he was. He didn't even come into the equation. Now, what was David doing? David was looking after sheep. But while, looking after sheep, doing the odd job, doing the not so good job, right? Doing the cleaning in the house, doing the caretaker work, doing the stuff that no one likes to do. Oh, he's with the sheep. David was with the sheep, but while he was working, he was in his center. He was mindful, he was awake, he wasn't asleep. He was forging that deep relationship with himself, that deep connection with himself. And so slowly, as the years went by, and he was only young, he was only 18, 19 at the time, but he was still in that place where he was realizing who he was. Now, when the moment came, you know the story, the Philistines came over to conquer a plot of land, and they pulled out, and there was a divide, and there was, on one side were the Philistines and on one side were the Hebrews. And suddenly the Philistines said, "Look, we've got this massive warrior," and Goliath appeared, and he voiced his rage, and he called forth a challenge, and the whole Israeli army was paralyzed. And in the midst of all that, this young kid looks at Goliath and he says to himself, "I can take this guy. I can handle him. I've done this before." Now, where had he done this before? You see, David was looking after sheep. And while he was looking after sheep, there was always going to be a wolf somewhere. And the way that he had trained himself to protect his sheep was with a sling and a stone. Now, what does that say? that says that in your everyday, mundane, 24-hour cycle, there is always something that will produce a particular skill in you. Now for David, it was a sling and a rock. That's all it was. That's all he had. That's all he had in his hand. But for him, that was enough. And that's why I'm saying that your 24-hour cycle is enough, that what you possess is enough, that you are enough. And when you see, once you know you're enough and what you possess is enough, Goliaths come your way. And a Goliath doesn't have to be in the manifestation of a 12-foot giant ripped to the bone coming at you with a sword. It can be anything. It could be a difficult relationship. It could be your next project. It could be, it could be any situation, any difficult situation in your life where it's looking at you and you're thinking, how am I going to get through this? See, David looked at what came through his 24-hour cycle while everyone else was paralyzed, because that's what fear does. It always paralyzes. David didn't do that. David responded and ran to the fight, which is what will happen if you know who you are. You will not buckle. You will not be paralyzed. You won't make excuses. You won't say, I won't do that. I'll do that tomorrow. I can't do that. I'm not able. I haven't had the training. You won't say any of those things. You'll say, who I am is enough. What I possess is enough. What I have in my hand is enough. If you are abiding and getting to know who you really are. So David said to the King Saul, look, let me have this opportunity. There's no way that I'm going to allow this beast to paralyze us. There's no way. And you see, we can take another lesson from that. Fear, if we're not sitting quietly and abiding and observing it, fear is one of the key emotions that is molding our choices, our habits. It's molding us. But if you're not sitting quietly observing, you'll never know. You're just, because fear, once it creeps in, it has a language, and it slowly works into your life, and it slowly starts diluting the way that you speak. It slowly starts influencing the way that you think and how you feel, and slowly but surely you make a compromise with it, you make a little agreement with it, and slowly but surely it becomes part of who you are, and all of a sudden you're wearing a garment. But it's so entwined and it's so bound inside of you that no one can see it, because it's just become part of you. Now David did not allow this. So he ran to the king and he said, listen, give me the opportunity to take this guy down. And immediately Saul said, okay, cool. I can see that you've got courage. I can see that you've risen to the call. I can see that you've got some fire in you. It's exactly what I need. However, put on my garment, take a shield with you, take a sword with you, and wear my armor. Now, put yourself into this situation. Imagine that happening into your life. Something happens in your 24-hour cycle, and you run to a friend and you say, look, this has happened, but don't worry, I'm going to take it. But your friend says to you, no, listen to me. I've got far more experience. You're too young. What you need is this. You need to apply this, and you need to wear this tomorrow and speak like this, and you need to act like this, and only then you'll be able to overcome it. But that's what this king was saying to David. And David said, no, listen, I'm running to this battle as I am. The king's saying, but what weapon? What I've got in my hand? But what have you got in your hand? I've got 5 stones and a sling. Well, what do you mean? But this is how I've dealt with the bears. This is how I've dealt with the wolves. This is how I've dealt with my 24-hour cycle. I don't need your garments. I don't need your experience. My experience has come from my 24-hour cycle. I have found victory upon victory, day after day after day after day, and I'm ready. That's what David was saying. See, you cannot apply someone else's experience, someone else's bread, someone else's sword into your 24-hour cycle. That is your responsibility. And you can only do that when you win your 24-hour cycles. And it starts off with your sacred aloneness. It's only then that when you realize how important this sacred aloneness is, and you draw a circle in your secret place, in your room, and say, no, this circle is for 1 hour for me in every single 24-hour cycle that I live. I need 1 hour. And David did that. And so, he never doubted what he possessed. And, the king would have had the best garment, the best protection, the best sword, the best shield. But David said, don't want it. Too heavy, don't fit. That's your experience. That's your garment. I've got my garment. And so David ran to the battle, and the next stage was they had a face-off. And of course there's going to be trash talk. Of course it happens every day. Of course it happens. Trash talk, people trashing down at you, haters, people disagreeing with you, people trying to manipulate you, people trying to belittle you, people trying to bully you, people trying to make themselves, enlarge themselves and belittle. That happens every single day of our lives, and that will happen for the rest of our lives. Why? Because we live in a competitive world, unfortunately, but it's a reality. Whatever you choose to do, there's competition, and where there is competition, there is jealousy, and where there is jealousy, there is trash talk. And so David came, and Goliath spoke degrading, derogative, belittling words. But David knew. David looked him. And David looked in a very key place, okay? David looked at Goliath right at the center, in between his two eyes. He looked just on the top of his nose, where that soft part is, where we call the third eye. Now, anyone who does martial arts knows, and everyone knows that point. People used to wear protection, even nowadays, because if you were hitting that point, they'd call it the evil eye. And so it had fame across the globe, that point. And everyone knows if you get hit there, you can die. It's a very vulnerable point. So David looked straight into the center of that fear. Now, that's the next stage, because it's a beautiful lesson here, because when fear arises, do we ever sit quietly in our center and look and think and feel what that fear is, and really observe it, really look at it eye to eye and see? Because if we did, most of our fears are only projections, are only experiences that we've had in the past that have hurt us. But David looked right into the center of that fear, way, 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 way beyond what the fear could do, but what he was looking at the fear with eyes of, I am more than capable. I am more than enough. I have done this in the past. I have hit this thing before. And he sat there quietly, took out his sling, and he knocked Goliath like a sack of potatoes. And in one 24-hour cycle, David became a shepherd boy to a hero. And that story has been shared. Years, centuries have gone by and people have shared that story. Now, I'm not a historian. I can't tell you did it happen, but I know that Goliaths happen every day of our lives. And I also know that unless you abide in stillness, David was the one who wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And he talks about green pastures and still waters. So we know that David was a man of deep contemplation, deep meditation, deep stillness. And we know that he was a psalmist and a harp player, so he was creative. But he was also a warrior. But without the stillness, without that sacred circle, without that sacred aloneness, he would have never realized his full potential. And so in one 24-hour cycle, from a little shepherd boy to a national hero. And that can happen to you. You might be in any point, in any chapter, in any page of your life right now. And you might be thinking, listen, I just want to quit. I just want to throw the towel in. This Goliath's too big. I don't want to move forward. I can't move forward. I'm not telling you to move forward. I'm not telling you to even look at your Goliath. I'm not even telling you to look at the center of your fear. I'm saying, sit still in your enoughness, in your aloneness, and see you being with yourself as an opportunity for you to get to know who you are, so that you can live the life that you want to live, so that you can fulfill all of your potential, so that you can forge the life that you see in your heart, so that you can let go of the things that are toxic, so that you can let go of everything that is weighing you down. It won't happen overnight. It will happen day by day in every sacred 24-hour cycle.